communicate with anybody because you understand communication.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, fell right in there. And so I think that is kind of a really great thing to be able to do. I remember reading Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, I think it was. It might have been 451, but one of those Kurt Vonnegut books where he's, I think it's Cat's Cradle, where he talks about a super genius guy. This guy was so smart. He was so smart, he could even explain really incredibly complex things to simple people and make them understand it. You know, he could, you know?
Yeah.
So he didn't have to use 50-cent words all the time. He could explain it in a way that I could understand it.
Yeah.
You know? And that's somebody who's really smart.
That's important.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, to not speak above people. But then
to explain it the way that they can get it.
Yeah, and then there is like someone from my high school, their younger sister contacted me and was like, oh, I really want to become like a life coach or something like that, you know. But I didn't have any suggestions for NLP classes for her in Missouri because I just not aware. And then of course she was like, well, I'm thinking of going to college to become a therapist or a counselor. And then the question started to come to me, what is what you're doing or studying to become different than being a therapist or going to see a therapist and going to see a counselor? And I had to Google that. You know, just because I knew what the answer was, but I just needed some, you know, because there is a difference. So,
yeah, and
those are the most common questions.
A lot of overlap as well. I mean, cognitive behavior therapy, like there's some regards.
I have a good definition.
What's that, Nick?
You want me to say it?
Yeah, say it.
All right.
Help out.
I don't know if it's a good definition. For me, it's good.
Ah.
Because years ago, you know, I built a computer in 78, whatever. And
78 RPM?
1978.
Oh, nice.
So if you take it with the analogy of computing, if you're gonna think of your brain or the brain as a computer, or does similar things as a computer, much more complex. You know, we all, our brains are program writing computers. We write programs all day, trances or subroutines. And we live these programs that we write haphazardly. So if you study NLP, you learn, you know, source code to maybe be able to recognize what you're doing or write something yourself.
Okay. That makes sense, and certainly that would be an apt analogy for somebody who knows what you're talking about. And, you know, but a lot of people don't know what that means, but I'm just asking.
You play a video game,
yeah,
right?
It's good, it's good, it's good.
But do you know how to write the video game?
Yeah, right. Very, very different.
Well, my question is, the person might ask is what's the difference between that and other psychology methodologies? It's sort of, I'm struggling to find a definition that would clearly distinguish NLP from, I don't know, Freudian, whatever. Because this is, you know, the same words can be similarly said.
Well, okay. I guess to really be able to, from an educated standpoint, answer that question thoroughly, you'd need to understand Freudian psychology and other forms of psychology to be able to say this is the difference between this and that, you know, point by point by point. But there's a enormous difference.
Oh, I know.
I know. I mean, it's
how do you explain it in the definition? And like, if someone asks.
Well, how would I explain it?
Yeah, how would you explain it?
Freudian psychology and
well,
NLP?
NLP versus, yeah, okay, Freudian psychology.
Well, let me put it, I'll say traditional psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Traditional psychotherapy looks at the problem and says, why is it that way? And then you attempt to analyze the problem so that you can gain insight as to why it is that way, so then maybe you'll change it. Typically what happens with that approach is that by analyzing the problem becomes more filled out, more three-dimensional, more real, and very often it becomes more of a problem than it was to start with. But the person gets really good at talking about it. And you can talk about it very educatedly with really interesting terms, you know, psychobabble, if you will. For, you know, entertaining people at cocktail parties or making movies like Woody Allen.
This is psychotherapy?
Yeah. Whereas NLP Ericksonian approaches, Ericksonian hypnosis perhaps, Ericksonian psychotherapy, says, okay, that's what the problem is, fine. What are you looking for? What do you want to have?
So the way that I describe it is that in layman's terms, in the most simplest terms, under 25 words, I said, therapy is the reflection of the past. Because I feel like I went to therapy at some
Yeah.
point in time in life. All we talked about was my past.
Yeah, it's an
And
analysis of the past.
Absolutely. You can understand how you're processing it up to this point.
Right.
And then I stopped therapy because it wasn't helping me go from here to what I would want in the future.
That's exactly right. And
That's what I was kind of saying, what
yeah.
coaching,
Yeah, yeah.
even that's such a trendy term now.
Yeah.
like,
I
you
think
know,
what NLP does is
coaching,
it attempts to say, well, where do you go from here? You know, what is it
Yeah.
that you want? And let's find out how that works. Not necessarily why, but how.
And
It
some
changes
people
the
aren't
question
ready
from
for that.
why to how.
Some people need to
Sometimes
rehash
I
the
think
past.
I think it's useful sometimes to do this. I think it's, for me, a lot more useful, not necessarily not useful, but more useful.
Mhm.
Right? I'm not discounting this entirely, but I'm saying it's more useful to focus on what I do want and say, how do we get that to start happening?
Mhm.
And I think that's the chief difference. And what NLP also does, or Ericksonian approaches to psychotherapy, because not all of NLP is therapeutic based. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But the aspects of NLP that are therapeutic based look at what it is that you do want, and you start to analyze that. So the same process of analysis applied to the good stuff. Like, as an example, Tony Robbins has this thing about morning questions and evening questions and this. Are you familiar with that at all, anybody? As an example, he asks a morning question. One of the morning questions is, what are you happy about in your life now? So if you answer that question, what's something you're happy about in your life? One thing. Go.
Where I live.
Okay, you're happy about where you live. So when you think about a thing that you're happy about, and you say it's where I live, what do you got? You got a picture, or you got a representation of some kind of where I live. It's two-dimensional, right? It's just a dissociative, I'm happy about where I live. But if I start to say, okay, well, why? You know, we start to analyze it, doing that why question. Why does it make you happy? In order to answer that question, you have to start doing that analysis thing. You're applying that same analysis process to this thing that makes you happy. So it becomes not just two-dimensional, but three-dimensional, or four-dimensional, five-dimensional, as many dimensions as you can fit in, right? You start to really, it becomes bigger, realer, more associated. Then you ask the third question of the morning questions, which is, how does that make you feel? And in order to answer that question, what do you have to do? You gotta feel it. You gotta put it on. How does it make you feel? Well, let me see, it makes me feel good, right? To answer the question, you have to actually associate to it. You have to actually feel it. Instead of just being a two-dimensional thing, it's now become, you know, an associated three-dimensional thing. So analysis can be a really good thing when you apply it to the good stuff. You know, Erickson used to say, learn their patterns of happiness. You know, so all of your answers are excellent answers, and